First of all, I was drafted into the Army as a private about a week after I graduated from college in 1952, and ended up, as everybody does that goes into the military, I ended up being sought after to go to different schools. I ended up going to Ranger School Airborne. I'd never been in an airplane when they asked me to see about flying in a helicopter, and I'd never seen one of them before. This was back in the 50s. And I went through and passed my my work that I needed to do to keep out of going, being the coward I was, to keep out of going to Korea. As it turned out, I finished the helicopter school and still went to Korea. When I came back, I stayed in the Army for about 2 years and got out. Really loved flying helicopters. And I was a MASH helicopter pilot. I finished up the flying for the Army, became a helicopter pilot for New York Airways, and then in South America, I was the first helicopter pilot to fly in South America for Dutch Shell Oil Company in Venezuela. I was then asked to go back into the service and ended up with just a dream assignment for a bachelor, and I was the commanding officer of the SHAPE NATO flight detachment at Orly Airport, and had an apartment 1/2 a block from the Eiffel Tower where I could watch all those beautiful French ladies as they paraded up and down. I ended up staying there for about 2 years. I received a message from the Department of Defense saying, and I commanded a small helicopter unit with 3 helicopters, and I ended up actually going to being told that I would be working for Dwight D. Eisenhower for 5 weeks, doing a TV documentary called D-Day Plus 20. It was with Ike and Walter Cronkite. I stayed with him for 5 weeks as we toured the battlefields of Normandy, and I got a really great feeling about what happened on D-Day at Normandy Beach. When I finished that flight and Ike had returned to Washington, I received a letter stating that I would be going to the White House when I finished my tour. Kennedy was the president. I stayed, I had to stay in France until all of my tour was up, which was another 3 months, and I needed a clearance, which I didn't have. It turned out that Kennedy was assassinated shortly before my opportunity to fly with President Kennedy. Lyndon Johnson was another story. I spent 2 years under him in Washington, and it was a classified mission to evacuate the Washington area in event of nuclear war. When I got back to Washington, D.C., I went to another school and then was assigned to the emergency evacuation of the president and vice president from the Washington, D.C. area. I went from there to, we finished all of that, and I went from there. Johnson decided he wanted one of the 2 units that was supporting the White House out on the LBJ Ranch, and so he sent the Army out to Texas, and Marines had Washington, D.C. I was excess, and Lyndon Johnson said I was such a good boy that he was going to give me a year off for good behavior, and I managed to go and take command of a unit in Vietnam with 26 helicopters, and managed to get shot down my first flight, and I thanked him ever since. or I flew for 1 year on that first tour, and had I guess about 376 missions uh, while I was over there. When I came back, I was assigned to the LBJ Ranch in Texas, and I don't have anything against Lyndon Johnson. Sometimes it was kind of funny to watch some of the stuff that he got into. Uh, but I did have, I stayed there for the full year. When I came back, I went to the LBJ Ranch in Texas and had another opportunity at flying with Eisenhower. He was out in Palm Springs, and Johnson sent me out there to fly for him for a month. The day that I arrived there, he had a heart attack at March Field, and I stayed with him for a month. And the last day I was there, he called me up to the hospital room where he was and said, "I've seen you before in France." And I said, "Yes, sir." And when I walked in, there were 8 of the most beautiful Air Force nurses I've ever seen. And I grinned, and he caught it, and he said, "I get well a lot quicker if I get pretty girls around me." I agreed with him. So I stayed there for the 2 years until he announced that he was not going to run for re-election. And when Johnson was, when he went out of office, I became the senior helicopter pilot at the White House. There were about 60 of us. And I stayed on at the White House for another 10 years. I had 580 flights with presidents or foreign heads of states on board. I've flown 5 U.S. presidents, and I've flown not only the 5 U.S. presidents, but I had opportunities to fly foreign heads of states, to include Brezhnev and excuse me, Brezhnev and Andropov and Charles de Gaulle. I had an opportunity to fly Anwar Sadat, King Hussein of Jordan, and Hosni Mubarak, who's now in jail in Egypt. I received a letter or an email from one of his friends just yesterday, I guess it was, it came in. I stayed on with President Nixon for 5.5 years and took him out the last day he was in office. I got attached to that helicopter. We gave Anwar Sadat a helicopter, and I argued with Henry Kissinger about giving it away, and he said, "Just be quiet or we're going to give you away." I stayed on and had a great career at the White House with the 580 flights with the president or head of state on board is somewhat of a record. And I'm sorry that we don't have those photos and the slide show that we had, but I will promise if you want me to come back and do it, I will certainly do it. It's been an honor for me, and I have a new book out that has seemed to catch on fire. It came out and was published in January, and it has a lot of secrets. Some things that are rather off color. Lyndon Johnson, I asked a Secret Service agent one day, how come they got so many nurses, so many people around here, that females that were there to, oh yeah, the secretaries. I asked him, I said, how come we've got so many secretaries out here? And he says, well, he just hired 9 and 3 of them can type, so I don't know. Any questions? This is just a little short show on it. I promise to come back again and listen to the ukuleles and also fix my computer. No questions? Yes.
What type of helicopter did you fly? Include Sikorsky's, Hueys?
s- well, I started out with the Sikorsky H-3s out of Bridgeport, Connecticut, and uh, and we also had some Hueys for quick trips, the N models with the new twin engines on them. The Sikorskys were really a great helicopter for that mission, and the one that we gave to Anwar Sadat, I was asked to go last year and give a speech in Atlanta because that helicopter was used the first time by Kennedy in the fall of 1961, and it's still being used. There was some other helicopters that we would borrow and attach to us while we did the missions that we had to do. And I was responsible for all of the trips outside of Washington, D.C., but mostly the ones that were associated with overseas trips. I made the first helicopter landing in St. Peter's Square in Vatican City. Had missions in Paris, London, Bonn, Manila. I flew the only mission in history with a president in a combat helicopter in a combat zone, and that was President Nixon in 1976. So does that answer? Yes, go ahead.
What was your most hazardous flight, and did you ever auto rotate?
The most hazardous flight I ever had was with Pat Nixon on board. And pardon?
Does that mean that it was actually a bumpy ride or something?
I received a call. I was up at Camp David with the President and First Lady, and the newspaper people came in and said that there was a big earthquake in Peru, in the northern part of Peru, and 170,000 people died in about 3 minutes. And I was assigned the task that night to take one helicopter and go to Peru and fly Pat Nixon up into the area where the most of the earthquake damage had been occurred. The northern part of Peru is very high. I landed on a soccer field at 11,200 feet, and the temperatures were high. It was a dangerous mission. I finally ended up making a running takeoff like a regular jet would do because I couldn't hover the helicopter, and I was getting pressure to take and go ahead and do the mission. Well, I finally got it into the air and we finished the mission. When I dropped off Pat Nixon and Consuelo de Velasco, who was the wife of the president of Peru, they signed the map that I was using, and the Marines were also there with the C-46s, and it was just too high and heavy for them. They lost 4 helicopters. Shouldn't have been flying the mission, or should have had a better control over the whole thing. But that was one of them. Any more questions? Yes.
Is your book going to be easy for us to buy?
Yes, we have some right back here right now. So it's got some revelations in it. Yes.
Which unit were you attached to in Vietnam?
I commanded the B Company 228, which is a Chinook company. It's big, carried about 48 passengers, and I had 24 of those. I went back again, and I failed to mention this, but I went back again incognito. I was in Manila with President Nixon, and I was told that I would be dropped off rather than go to Bangkok where I was supposed to go, but I would be dropped off in Vietnam and would receive orders there. So I ended up taking command of a battalion of helicopters, about 240 of them, and flew 3 missions with President Nixon and 2 with Pat Nixon. Hillary had a little bit of a problem with one of those when she ran against Obama a year and a half ago. She claimed that she had been the only first lady to fly in a combat situation, and the next morning, the New York Times contacted me and said, "We have a photo of you with Pat Nixon holding her arm. Where was this taken?" I said, "It was in Saigon, or just north of Saigon." She dropped out of the race a short time after that. Next, please. Yes, sir.
If you were to sit down for an afternoon of drinking soda pop with one of the presidents and just spending the afternoon, which one would it be and why?
I'd say it would probably be Ike. He was down to earth. He knew what he was doing. He made a statement when he was going out of office that that you have to be careful about what you're doing. And let's see, what else? Sometimes my brain doesn't catch up with my conversations, but Ike was great. Nixon was easy to work for. I mean, he was appreciative of everything. I flew him 461 times while he was president, and I had a total of 580 flights with a president or a head of state on board, and 27 foreign heads of states. And you're always under a lot of pressure when you're doing all that, because they don't like to be told the weather's not good or this is not good. But I had a very successful career without any major incidents. Yes?
Did you ever have any female pilots?
Female? I had, but about the time I was leaving, I started looking for a female. And tonight I had invited the co-pilot that I used on the flight with, let's see, on the last flight with Nixon. I flew that flight, and my co-pilot lives in Long Beach. And he was the first black pilot to fly a president. I brought in 3 of them, and they had a total of about 140 flights amongst themselves, and they did a great job. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it tonight. But maybe if you'll give us another chance, I'll bring him and make sure that my slide projector is working. Next. And
When you flew Nixon for the last time, were you busy at the controls, or did you see him flash the victory sign?
that is a question that is, every time I give a talk anymore, that comes up. I would have to say that on that flight, it was rather unusual. I knew for the night before that I was going to be taking him out on his last flight, and I was told also that I would shut down on the lawn. Normally, you'd come in and you'd stop for 3 to 5 minutes. Your passenger would get on board, and you'd take them to Andrews or wherever you're going to take them. In this case, we actually landed in front of Air Force One, which is normal, at Andrews Air Force Base, and that's about a 12-minute flight from the White House. When we got on the ground, I shut down. I knew who the passengers were going to be, and I was told to, when we got airborne and I got to Andrews Air Force Base, Pat Nixon was the first one to come through the cockpit, and she thanked me for all the flights that I'd had with them. And Nixon was next, and I heard Pat Nixon say, "Oh, it's so sad, it's so sad," and that's all I heard from her. But he came up into the cockpit and slapped me on the back and said, "Thanks for all these flights that you've had over the last 5.5 years, and we really, really appreciate it." He says, but I have to walk from here to Air Force One, and there were 12,000 people out at Andrews waiting to see him break down and start crying. And I had tears in my eyes. He says, so stop that until I get on Air Force One. And so that's what happened. He got on Air Force One, and that was the end of it. He was stoic. He was strong. I also flew, as I think you've heard, for 4 years with Lyndon Johnson, and there's a lot of stuff in my book about that. But that was basically it. What?
Were you able to see it from your?
Oh yeah, I did. I could see it. I leaned back and looked out the steps from the helicopter. And by the way, that helicopter, I found it. It was in a parking lot wrapped in plastic about 6 years ago in Connecticut, or up in New England. And I conned the Navy out of it. It had been wrapped in plastic and sitting in a parking lot for 12 years. I got volunteers out at March Field, and we took about 19,000 man-hours to restore it. I bummed another helicopter from the Navy, and that helicopter is now at the Nixon Library and open to the public. It's there permanently, and it's a permanent thing. So it is there. It looks exactly the way it did when I flew it back during my time at the White House. And there's another one up at Ronald Reagan Library, and it's just as well. It's very well kept up as well. And those are permanently there. Yes.
Wanted to ask you, when you were shot down in Vietnam, were you in friendly territory or?
No, there was no friendly territory where I was.
Tell us a little more about that.
Well, I told you Lyndon gave me a year off for good behavior, and that's. I got shot down leading a flight of 16 helicopters right on the Laotian-Cambodian border, and I managed. After about 7 hours, we had one engine that had been burnt out from being shot at, and I got it on the ground, and managed to fly it out on the single engine. I stripped it down and flew it out and got it back, and it took us about 6 months to repair it. It was a bad flight from my standpoint because I went into a field that had just been sprayed with Agent Orange from Dow Chemical, and I've had 9 different types of cancers from Agent Orange. But I'm still at 82. I'm still kicking around. So, thank you. Thank you. One last thing. While I was in Vietnam, my boss came over to me one time, and this is when I commanded the unit with the 26 Chinook helicopters. And my boss came over to me and said, I've got a passenger that wants to fly with you for the next 3 or 4 days. This was Christmas Day in 1966. And I said, what do you mean I'm going to fly him? Just one person? He said, it's John Steinbeck, the author. And Lyndon Johnson had sent him over there to fly and see what was going wrong with the war. Well, everybody knew what was going wrong with it. But when he got back, he wrote this and sent it to Lyndon Johnson. I wish I could tell you about these pilots. They make me sick with envy. They ride their vehicles the way a man controls a fine, well-trained quarter horse. They weave along stream beds, rise like swallows to clear trees, then turn and twist and dip like swifts in the evening. John Steinbeck. Thank you.